September 1692, an open field beside the Salem jail. Sheriff George Corwin placed another stone on the wooden board, 40 pounds of rock, then 60, then 80. The man beneath them, 80 years old, stripped naked, refused to speak. When asked again to enter his plea, his answer came in 2 words: more weight. Those words would echo through American history. But what makes them extraordinary isn't the defiance. It's that Giles Corey knew exactly what his silence would cost him, and he calculated that 2 days of being slowly crushed to death was worth it. This is the story of how an imperfect man made a perfect protest against injustice. By September 1692, the Salem Witch Trials had already claimed 19 lives by hanging. Over 100 people sat in prison cells awaiting trial. The special court established to handle these cases, the Court of Oyer and Termina, had achieved a perfect conviction rate. Every single person who pleaded not guilty had been found guilty and executed. Giles Corey understood something that would take the rest of Salem months to realize. This court was uninterested in justice. It was a machine designed to produce convictions, and he decided he would rather die than let that machine use him. To understand why an 80-year-old farmer chose to be crushed to death, you need to understand the man himself. And here, the story becomes complicated, because Giles Corey was not a simple hero. He was baptized on August 16, 1611, in England. By the time he reached his 80s in Colonial, Massachusetts, he'd built himself into a prosperous farmer in Salem Farms, now West Peabody. He owned extensive landholdings and had married 3 times. By colonial standards, he was wealthy, but his neighbors used different words to describe him: contentious, litigious, quarrelsome. Contemporary records describe him as leading a scandalous life, the kind of man who seemed to enjoy conflict. And then there was the darkest chapter. In 1675, 17 years before the witch trials, Giles Corey beat a farm worker named Jacob Goodale to death. Not in sudden rage, he struck him with a stick approximately 100 times. Goodale didn't die immediately. Corey sent him for medical attention, but within days Goodale was dead. Corey was charged with murder. But colonial justice had its own logic. Corporal punishment against servants was legal. The court convicted him only of using unreasonable force and imposed a fine. The man who killed Jacob Goodale faced minimal consequences. So when we talk about Giles Corey's heroic death, we must hold both truths at once. This was a man who had beaten another man to death and escaped real justice. And this was also a man who would choose to die under torture rather than participate in an unjust system. People are complicated. History is complicated. In 1690, Corey married his 3rd wife, Martha Pannon. Martha was different from her contentious husband. Deeply religious, she was admitted to the Salem Village Church in 1691 and earned genuine respect in the community. More importantly, Martha was skeptical. When the witch trial accusations began spreading through Salem in early 1692, Martha Corey didn't join the panic. She publicly criticized the trials. She refused to believe that witches were actually among them. On March 19, 1692, Martha Corey was arrested for witchcraft, and in the darkest turn of this story, her own husband testified against her. Giles Corey stood before the magistrates and claimed that Martha had bewitched him, that she'd bewitched his farm animals, that strange things had been happening since she'd started questioning the trials. We don't know exactly why. Fear, self-preservation, the same contentious nature that had defined his life. Whatever the reason, Giles Corey betrayed his wife to the very court that would later kill them both. But within weeks, something changed. Giles tried to recant his testimony. In Colonial, Massachusetts, this was disastrous. Recanting wasn't seen as correcting a mistake, it was seen as perjury. Worse, the court interpreted his reversal as evidence of something sinister. Why would a man suddenly change his story about witchcraft unless he himself was under the devil's influence? On April 18, 1692, exactly 1 month after his wife's arrest, Giles Corey was formally accused of witchcraft. The accusations came from the same group of afflicted girls at the center of every Salem accusation. Ann Putnam Jr. claimed that on April 13th, Corey's specter had visited her and demanded she sign the Devil's Book. More dramatically, she reported that a ghostly figure had appeared announcing it had been murdered by Corey, and that Corey had made a covenant with Satan, the ghost of Jacob Goodale 17 years later, returning to accuse his killer. This was the evidence. Invisible spirits, spectral visits, dreams and visions that no one else could verify. And under the rules of the Court of Oyer and Termina, it was enough. To understand why spectral evidence could convict someone, you need to understand how this court operated. Governor William Phips had established it specifically to handle the flood of witchcraft accusations. Chief Justice William Stoughton, a true believer in the reality of witchcraft, implemented a revolutionary rule. He allowed spectral evidence. This meant that if someone testified that your invisible spirit had appeared to them and harmed them, that testimony could convict you. The theological problem was obvious. Could the devil take on the shape of an innocent person? If so, then spectral evidence proved nothing. But Stoughton overruled the objections, and he added another element. Confession meant survival. Those who admitted to witchcraft were spared. Those who maintained their innocence were hanged. The system was perfectly designed to produce convictions. How do you prove your invisible spirit didn't visit someone in a dream? The evidence was, by definition, impossible to refute. By September 1692, Giles Corey had watched this unfold. He'd seen neighbors tried and convicted on impossible evidence. He understood that walking into that courtroom and saying not guilty was a death sentence. But he also understood there was something worse than death. When Giles Corey appeared before the court on September 16, 1692, the magistrates expected a straightforward proceeding. The accused would plead not guilty, the afflicted girls would testify, the jury would convict, another which would hang. But when the clerk asked how he pleaded to the charges of witchcraft, Corey did something unprecedented. He said nothing. The clerk asked again. Silence. The magistrates demanded he enter his plea. Silence. This wasn't confusion. This was calculated legal strategy. Under English common law, a defendant convicted of a felony would forfeit all property to the Crown through a process called attainder. If Corey entered a plea, went to trial, and was convicted, which seemed certain his entire estate would be seized. His family would inherit nothing. But if Corey never entered a plea, he technically never became a defendant. The trial couldn't proceed. And if he died without conviction, his property would pass to his heirs as planned. Some historians argue property protection was Corey's primary motive. But there's evidence of something deeper. He'd already written a will transferring his property. The legal protection of standing mute was almost redundant. More importantly, as historian Chadwick Hansen argued, Corey's death was a protest against the methods of the court. By refusing to plead, Giles Corey was saying, "I will not grant this court the authority of my consent. I will not participate in this farce. I will not legitimize your process." It was civil disobedience, an 80-year-old farmer refusing to acknowledge the court's authority over him. The magistrates had a remedy for this situation. English law prescribed peine forte, et durhard, and forceful punishment. The procedure was simple. The prisoner would be stripped naked, laid flat, a wooden board placed across the chest, then stones added one by one until the prisoner agreed to plead or died. On September 18, 1692, Sheriff George Corwin led Giles Corey to an open field beside the Salem jail. This happened in public view where townspeople could witness. Corey was stripped, laid face up, the board placed across his chest. Then the stones began. After each stone, the same question. Will you enter your plea? 40 pounds of stone. 60, 80. Will you plead? Guilty or not guilty? The process continued through the afternoon, through the night, through the next morning. Judge Samuel Sewell documented it. Much pains was used with him 2 days, one after another, by the court and Captain Gardner of Nantucket, who had been of his acquaintance, but all in vain. 2 days. For 2 days they added weight and demanded he speak. For 2 days Giles Corey refused. The human body cannot withstand hundreds of pounds of pressure on the chest. As the weight accumulated, breathing became nearly impossible. Sleep meant asphyxiation. At some point, according to eyewitness Robert Califf, the pressure forced Corey's tongue from his mouth. Sheriff Corwin used his cane to push it back in. After 2 days, the magistrates made their final demand. 3 times they asked Giles Corey to enter his plea. His response became legend. More weight. Not a plea for mercy, not a confession. More weight. Keep going. Show everyone watching what you're willing to do to an old man who refuses to participate in your theater. At approximately noon on September 19, 1692, Giles Corey died. He had never entered a plea. He had never been convicted. His property would pass to his heirs. 3 days later, his wife Martha was hanged with 7 others in the final mass execution of the Salem Witch Trials. But Corey's death had shifted something. The brutality was visible, undeniable. When accusations eventually reached Governor Phipps's own wife, he dissolved the court of Oyer and Termina. A new court prohibited spectral evidence, and without it, the trials collapsed. By May 1693, everyone still imprisoned received pardons. The Salem Witch Trials were over. Giles Corey's 2 words, more weight, stand as a testament to the power of refusal in the face of injustice.